show, and delighted to say joining me for the entire show is Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
So yeah, don't mention the election. We do need to mention, though, actually, another key point is you do need voter photo ID.
Yes.
It's the first time for a general election that is required. It's been used in local elections before, but people do need to show photo ID, not just bringing your polling card. So, you know.
And there's a list of those that you're allowed to take. Of course, people in Northern Ireland have had this for years and years and years and years, so it's nothing new.
It's nothing new there, but it is due for a lot of people here. A lot of people, so everyone's trying to remind you, do take photo ID if you haven't already. If you're postal ballot, you don't have to do that because effectively they've identified you through that postal ballot. But anyway, that's what we're allowed to say on that. Let's talk about the American elections, Philip.
What? People are copying us and having elections themselves?
Well, to be fair, we did give it to the world. Well, no, it wasn't. It was the French, really, wasn't it, I suppose? But anyway, yeah, we have the American election coming up on November the 5th. Yeah. It's a much longer election cycle than we have here a lot of the time. It's kind of 2 years, really. We don't even officially have a Democrat candidate and a Republican candidate, bizarrely. We have yet to have the Republican convention later in July and the Democrat convention in August. Although, basically, if those two men decide to stand, pretty much that's it. Yeah. Now, after that shockingly, absolutely dire performance that we had from Joe Biden at that TV presidential debate last Thursday, so a week ago today, a lot of people calling for, well, President Biden to stand aside, not as president now. No one wants Kamala Harris, VP, to step up to the job, which is what the Constitution would see happen. But they want him to not stand as the candidate. He's 81 years old. He's clearly mentally and physically infirm. He's not up to the job. I'm sorry, I don't even think that's up for debate anymore. We've been told that he was going to stand firm, that Jill, his wife, his son Hunter, his sister, apparently very, very close, they're like saying, no, sticking firm, he's going to carry on. Some senior figures, even Nancy Pelosi, the Democrats, saying it's legitimate to actually, it's reasonable to have these conversations. We've had one congressman actually saying publicly he needs to go. The New York Times editorials been saying he's got to go. There's more and more stories coming out about how this wasn't a one-off, it wasn't jet lag. He'd come back from this summit 2 weeks earlier. It wasn't just a cold. This is quite normal behaviour from him now. What do you think is going to happen? What do you think should happen?
Well, I think we've got two presumptive candidates on with Donald Trump and with Joe Biden. It's cruel what's happening to Joe Biden, and it's cruel what they're letting him go through. And there's no way, even if he gets elected, is he going to survive another 4 years as US president with the pressures that come on. And therefore, at some stage, they're either going to have to bring in the constitutional element to have him removed because he's not capable, and the vice president step in, or if he's sensible and those that are around him, he's 81 years old, time to retire gracefully.
I genuinely don't even know why anyone at 81 would want to be working full-time at all, let alone a job that is a 24/7 job. I mean, there are big enough questions about Donald Trump and the hours that he did when he was president. And again, it's like Joe Biden, apparently completely false
he's young,
anyway.
So he's 78.
So 78, yeah. But you can see he's still got his faculties. I mean, we've got a lot of other things, I think, wrong with him. But I mean, I know a lot of my audience disagree, but I'm sorry. I think both of these men are unfit for public office, but for different reasons. You've got, Joe Biden, 81, you just got to get through to next January. But there is so much that presidents have to do on a day-to-day basis, and he's claiming that, actually, when I was VP, when I was vice president, he said, I managed to get my golf handicap down to 6. You have to be playing a lot of golf to be doing that. That's not something to boast about.
Well, exactly. And the positions that are in there, I think there's too much personal boasting and there's too much personal ego involved in all of this. And I think there seems to be a degree of family ego with his wife Jill, and with what's going on with Hunter.
She's just been on the front cover of Vogue.
Yes,
women like that.
Yeah, but again, she's not a spring chicken, and well, neither am I. But I wouldn't want and don't feel that I would have the ability to have the energy
you as US president
to be US president.
Don't think you're very eligible, but
I think he's got until between the 19th and 22nd of August to step down. That's when the Democratic National Congress is. That's when he then becomes the candidate that is going forward.
Now, this is it. And we'll talk to an American who will understand more of this system than we do. Although I finally think that, like after the 2020 election and 2016, we get to know a lot of the machinations of the American Constitution more than perhaps we would expect to as a result of what happens. But, of course, I think the same for both conventions. They're not required They're not sort of required. So if your state has mandated you to vote, they actually can vote how they want. The question is whether they would do that. Everything really depends on him being willing to step aside. The question is, who do they think would be a better candidate? Now, there's a lot of talk at the moment that it's Kamala Harris, the VP. Which I know your eye, if you're not watching on the telly box, you're going to see the eye widening. Then, genuinely. The woman is a fool. The woman isn't. Have you seen this video going the rounds of her talking about how unburdened by the president, unburdened by the past or something? I mean, it's just the woman. The woman talks gibberish.
But you also find that your vice presidents seem to be pushed into a position where they don't really get the limelight. Even Joe Biden, when he was vice president to Barack Obama, didn't get the limelight in what's going on, and therefore we maybe get. Not a completely holistic view of what they're like from a political perspective.
Well, sometimes they just sort of balance the ticket.
Yeah.
And sometimes, it's like Obama had Joe Biden twice because Obama was a very young senator. You have this sort of, old school senator who'd been around for years. He knew how Washington worked, and that was reassuring. And then you had old white guy Biden saying, "Oh, we're going to have a woman as my VP." Yeah. And then it was very obvious to the women who were on the shortlist that it was going to be a woman of colour, a black woman or a mixed race woman of some sort. And again, if those are your credentials that you're looking for, as opposed to, is this person any good, and would this person make a half-decent president if I died in office? Yeah. Then that's what you end up with. I've got no time for anyone being appointed to any job because of either their genitals or their skin colour. Yeah. I don't want anyone not getting a job because of those two things. Yeah. But, name the amazing woman candidate who hasn't become American president. Because of that, her being just a woman. It ain't Hillary. People didn't not vote for her because she was a woman.
Yes, exactly. But the good thing about what's going on at the moment is that the US parties are discussing potential replacements for their candidates who are much younger, who can come through. Yeah. The bad thing is they should have done this 2 years ago before they went through the whole nomination process to get... you're not telling me that these are the two best candidates that the United States of the size of the population
an incumbent president
bring in.
Stays in that role. The question is, who would Donald Trump like to fight? Because it's very clear his attacks on Joe Biden. Look, during that debate, he played a brilliant role where he just stood there and just... didn't even make too many silly faces. Let the story be about Joe Biden and how incompetent he is. Well, that happened. Now his worry, of course, is that Joe Biden does actually get he can't be pushed. There is no process for pushing him realistically out as the candidacy. So unless he agrees to go. And now he started his attacks on Kamala Harris. He's not attacking Joe Biden so much anymore because we know that obviously he wants to fight
Biden's damaged goods now. So,
and Biden was behind in the polls. Well, we're still waiting for some latest polls to look at where he would be because, of course, again, very big country, a lot of people in a lot of different constituencies. Although, again, like many other countries, including our own, often it is actually only a few people in a few particular districts that make the difference. Question I'm asking you today, because we can't ask you about the British election. The US President Joe Biden is refusing to step down as Democrat candidate after his dire presidential debate performance. What is your reaction to that in terms of, do you want him to step down? Do you not want him to step down? I mean, the implications for the world are huge in terms of who is elected as American president. It depends, of course, whether you think that you want Donald Trump to win or Joe Biden. If you want Donald Trump to win, do you want him to go up against Biden? Or would you rather he went up against Kamala Harris or anyone else? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Give us your reaction. Give us your thoughts. Give us a call, please. 0344 499 1000. You can send a WhatsApp to the same number. You can text us on 87222. And you can get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. Look, can't wait to get your messages on that. Let's talk also about French elections. I mean, thank God we've got other countries' elections going on. Second round elections, Sunday, all day. Again, we'll get the exit polls sort of mid-late evening, and then overnight, by Monday morning, back on air, we will get to see what's actually happened. This is with Le Pen's national rally, having won the largest number of votes, over 33%, I think it was more than that, 38% in the first round. We've seen a few hundred candidates that have come second or third that would have more than 12.5% of the vote, who are therefore allowed to stand in the second round. We've seen them pull out. They've been doing deals, basically the centre and the left and hard left. I mean, again, everyone's very critical of the so-called hard right or far right, as the National Rally are called. I don't think they are a far right party anymore. They were. Front National,
but they've become more centre.
Yeah, that's why they're getting more votes. but there's no doubt at all. I mean, some of the candidates that will be the choice for candidates for voters in some seats are going to be incredibly hard left. I mean, properly. People, they use the word radical about the left. No. These people are really scary in a lot of ways in France. Some of these, what their policies are. So voters getting less of a choice, but basically, like with the French presidential election second round, just 2 candidates. Pick the one you want, and if you can't pick the one you want, pick the one you least don't want.
Well, exactly. You know, on a completely different democratic process to ours. It's still democracy, but I describe it almost as tactical withdrawals. So the different constituencies are looking at how they can get these electoral pacts to get the candidate that they want through to stop what they've defined as extreme parties from actually getting the seats, no matter how well they do in the first round of elections. And it seems as if the whole French democratic system was designed that way. It'll be an interesting vote, though, with Le Pen's party moving more centrist in its approach, whether that'll have a massive effect. Yeah,
and of course there will be implications, which we can't go into today, for British policy regarding the EU, regarding immigration and things. In terms of what's going on in European politics generally, this of course all follows on from what we saw with the the European parliamentary elections, where we did see that big shift to the right, didn't we?
Yeah, well, we did, and what we're seeing is an increased polarisation across all of the different elections that are happening. And the one question that comes from me, from my old intelligence background, is can we find any evidence of any external interference in what's going on in here? Because the greater disruption that there is within the electoral processes, the greater frictions that are created amongst different countries and different organisations across the world, not just in Europe, the more that plays into the likes of Vladimir Putin's hands and others. And I think we will find that when people get to really start to examine and get into the evidential piece, we'll find that there is a degree of electoral interference coming from outside entities that we found after the 2017 elections. But it's so deeply buried, it's not anything that's obvious, but it is, I think, clearly having an effect.
You really think that is the case? Because a lot of these things have been sort of poo-pooed over the years. People look into them as conspiracy theories about this, and they look into social media, what's going on. But, I mean, there's no doubt at all that countries like Russia would like to interfere with what happens in the EU. There's no doubt at all, or China and the like. But we've had those accusations about the Trump election. We had them about previous elections here. But very little evidence.
That's the difficulty. Finding that evidence is virtually impossible, because it's buried through completely legitimate fronts that will give to other completely legitimate fronts, that will give to other completely legitimate fronts, that will give to legitimate individuals that'll get it in. And then if the evidence is brought out, it is probably so massive in its implications that it will get buried by the government of the time. We haven't seen, after the last election, we haven't seen any evidence that's appeared around with
American elections,
European elections, or other elections around the world where there's been accusations of interference.
Very, very interesting. Well, I mean, it's going to be fascinating to watch. We'll get those results on Monday as well. Let's also talk about Ukraine, because we can talk about things going on in other countries. And again, the wonderful Kira Rudik, who's a Ukrainian MP, she was in on my show, and it was so lovely to see her out in the offices, because she's someone we spoke to many times. And we spoke to her also on the day after her own home. She had the windows blown in by aerial bombing from Russian rockets. Really, really terrifying what's going on there. And we do just have this ongoing thing where this battle, and again, this is where the American election comes back in, and of course European Union elections as well, in terms of how much support there will be for Ukraine, how much weaponry. This has implications, of course, for the defence spending by NATO as well. And we had the news the day before yesterday, and we discussed it on the show yesterday, that a senior official in the US State Department had said that, look, we can't allow Ukraine to join or get even on the road to joining NATO because of the levels of corruption in that country. And as you all know, as a former senior military intelligence officer, this is on an epic and grand scale in every former Soviet country, because life doesn't function without corruption. And by the way, it's the same thing as the corruption. Everyone thinks we've all lived in this country. During the Second World War, the level of corruption was absolutely huge. People go, oh no, it was wonderful, everyone had equal. They didn't.
No.
The black market in rationing and things was absolutely huge. But the key thing for Ukraine is they're getting enough weaponry now. US Congress has voted that money through, and again some money through. But the reconstruction is in the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions. Yeah. They haven't got enough weapons. They've got enough weaponry to fight Russia. But I don't understand, why is the West not giving Ukraine enough weaponry to defeat Russia? Because the NATO power, military power, the might of the American military, it dwarfs that of Russia. Yeah. Why are they not giving enough? Why are we not giving enough?
It's extremely complex, and there are a number of different issues there. One, we don't have enough to give, so we've had to build our defence industrial bases up.
Well,
so
that's in the UK.
Well, no, that's across Europe, and and looking into the United States, so we don't denude our stocks to a point where
we can't defend ourselves.
We can't defend ourselves, or look at elsewhere. We'll have to remember that the UK US isn't just Europe focused; it's also focused on the Pacific, and has got.
And many of the advisors for Biden and Trump actually are very much focused on the threat from China, aren't they? Rather than
exactly, and that's probably a bigger, longer-term threat. So there is a limit as to what can be given. There's also a limit as to what Ukraine can receive and deal with. If you look at the different natures of equipment, there's no point just giving them lots of equipment that they then, yes, they can drive a tank, but they can't fight the tank. And if they can drive it and they put it out on the front line before they're trained to use it, the same with the F-16s.
And the maintenance as well.
And the maintenance and the supply chains that are needed in there. These are hugely complex things. If that gets put into the front line before they can properly fight it and fight them together with the other complex vehicles, then they're going to get lost. They're going to get destroyed by the Russians. It'll be very easy for them to do that. And then politically, the implications that would have back in the capitals of Europe and in the United States would have massive implications, because it would be even harder to get the aid in. So it has to be brought in a graduated way, which seems cruel, but it allows the Ukrainians to be able to absorb it and do what they're doing and completely change their tactics, completely re-equip and work out what they're doing whilst they're fighting a high-intensity conflict. The UK couldn't do that. The US couldn't do that. Ukraine is doing it and doing it quite effectively. But we could be providing them more. And you get things like US domestic politics, which stopped a large amount of ammunition getting in because they were tying...
Congress wouldn't agree to the money.
Well, it was the Speaker of the House wouldn't agree to the vote. Congress had said they will vote for it. But, this one man stopped it because he was tying it to something to do with the immigration across the Mexican border, domestic politics. That's the sort of thing that's really hurting Ukraine. But this conflict is very difficult, and we will be talking about it for at least another 12, 24
and it's going to be a huge issue in politics around Europe and the US to come. And again, has implications, massive implications in the US presidential election we're asking our audience about today for funding for Ukraine. Again, Donald Trump says, hey, I'll have, basically, I think within a week or something, I'll have peace in Ukraine. Well, basically, if you stop sending any money whatsoever to Ukraine, and basically say to Russia, you can have whatever you want. I suppose you can have peace of a sort.
Yeah, but again, people talk about money going to Ukraine. It's not. It's military material. There's money put into banks for them to be able to fund what the Ukrainian government's doing. You pay wages and everything else. But the majority of the money has been spent in home country. So the latest $2.2 billion that had just come out of the Ukraine, out of the United States, is part of the $60 billion that was authorised.
Most of that 2.2 is
spent in factories in the United States. It's employing US people. It's getting more people.
They're not just handing over suitcases of cash.
No,
very good point. Philip Ingram, thank you so much.